When former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg threw his hat into the ring and decided to go head-to-head against Donald Trump for the White House, some people started talking about the battle of the billionaires. Well, today I sat down this morning with the presidential hopeful for this exclusive interview. But I do want to get your thoughts on the killing of Qasem Soleimani and the response by Iran last night. If you were president at this moment, how would you be handling this situation?
Well, number one, I probably wouldn't be in this situation. I think the guy that was killed was a bad guy. He killed a lot of Americans. Two other presidents looked at this and decided not to do anything. Donald Trump, this president, decided to do something. The issue is what happens after you do it. Do you put American lives in jeopardy? Do you run the risk of starting a war? There's all sorts of implications with your allies, and they have made commitments. What I worry about is Donald Trump does not have the infrastructure to give him advice. Number one, he doesn't know anything about foreign policy, and number two, even if he did, no one person can know everything. He denuded the State Department of all the experts on these areas. He thought it was ridiculous. We didn't need them. That's not true. This is an example of when you need them. And the fact that you don't need them every day doesn't mean you shouldn't have them and have them constantly study and role play and that sort of thing. Donald Trump tends to be impetuous, makes decisions without consulting people, makes decisions without understanding the implications. And I think we're lucky that Iran has chosen to have a relatively moderate response. They fired some missiles at one of our bases and made sure they didn't hit anybody. It's that kind of stuff. Then they can say to their people, we responded, but it doesn't give Donald Trump the ability even or the excuse to go and ratchet things up.
Are you concerned that this will embolden Iran to work even more diligently to get that nuclear capability they say they want?
Well, I think that you certainly, the more you cut them off and the more you stick them in the face, yes, they will go do that. We've been heading in that direction anyways. I was not very much in favor of the deal as it was constructed that we made with them, but I said it's the best deal, presumably, that we could have negotiated, and I certainly wouldn't walk away from it. We got a deal. We should have lived with the deal. And Donald Trump pulling out, and particularly without pulling out with our allies, is just not the right ways to run the government.
You talked about the president not having foreign policy expertise. You are well known for your business expertise. You are well known for the work you've done in philanthropy with gun control and health care. You don't have a strong foreign policy background either.
I'm not so sure that's true. Keep in mind, I do business in every country in the world with the exception of Iran and Yemen and North Korea. So I'm the United Nations ambassador for climate change and run organizations that work on climate change all around the world. Almost every one of certainly the major countries, I know the head of the government, regardless of what his or her title is, on a first-name basis. You remember all of these countries have embassies and consulates in New York. New York City has more embassies than any other city in the world. It's because the United Nations is here and because we're one of the most international cities. So I don't agree with that at all. But also, Deborah, you have experts to do these things. There's no I in the word team. And when you say, I know this and I know that, that's so ridiculous. And it says to me that you don't trust anybody and that you're afraid that if you ask somebody else, they're going to look better than you. I once said to Donald Trump when he asked me what he should do, I said, hire people that are smarter than you. He's not chosen to do that. And he's not been able to keep a team that turns over all the time. And that's true not just on foreign policy, on every policy. Nobody can be an expert in everything. And in fact, the president's job is to build the team or teams to get them to work together, to attract the best people to work in them, keep them happy and paid and working collaboratively and collectively. That's what management's all about. And the president's job is a management job. Nobody should think that any president is the expert, the world's expert on any one of these areas, whether it's diplomacy or defense or education or finance, investments. It's just not the job, and nobody can be that person. Even if you're a foreign policy expert, you will be an expert on one or two areas in foreign policy. Nobody's an expert on everything. And I think another one of the mistakes that we're making is we appoint ambassadors who do not speak the language of the country we appoint them to. How can they find out what's going on the streets and report to you? They're going to depend on somebody who you didn't hire and would have no confidence in, even if you did hire them. So we glamorize and we assume that the president is all-knowing. And number one, it's not the job to be all-knowing, and number two, she or he isn't.
Right. You're here today in Illinois to launch your All-In Economy jobs program, and we're at a community college that offers, based on the stuff behind you, training in areas that are begging for jobs.
Yes.
What is your message to the people here on the south side of Chicago?
Well, we've chosen 3 places to go and give basically a little tailored, but a message to 3 different areas. This is an area, a poor area of Chicago. We're going to a farm. It's a whole different industry and very impacted by the tariffs. And then to Akron, which used to be a city that had an enormous number of manufacturing jobs. A lot of them have left, but there's still some there. There's a core there of people who really could build an industry. And my message is, we've got to improve places and people. Those are the 2 things. Places, which we did in New York, where companies can come and start a business, and you've provided the infrastructure and the transportation to get there. Places where there's land available or buildings that they can easily move into and start their business without spending years getting ready when they have a new idea. People, it's training. It's getting people to be able to, when you give mass transit so they don't have to live where the job is, they can use that mass transit and they're comfortable doing it. But there's a whole bunch of things, and I'm going to talk about separate things for places and then things for people. You can have programs that subsidize labor, for example, apprentice programs, which are very popular in Europe. Why would an employer go out and take a bunch of people who don't have the skills that the employer needs and bring them in to train them? That's what they do in an apprentice program. Well, if you were to subsidize, not pay for, but subsidize their wages, they could get workers who they don't have to pay that much for, but once these workers get trained, they'll have first chance to hire them, and presumably if they're trained well, they're the people they want.
And you would subsidize that through tax credits to the employer?
You can do that or write a check directly. I think 2 things. One, we have all these programs and we never measure them. So the governor or the mayor or the president says, we're going to have a program that creates 10 zillion jobs, and then nobody counts. It's an announcement, but they make sure that nobody can use it. Why? Because they don't want to pay for it. So they want to have it both ways. What I'm about, and anybody that's lived in New York City during the 12 years I was mayor knows, I'm about accountability. I think the numbers should be up every day on a board. How many people are going to work? We give a program, we right now all have programs where you are a service that takes our citizens and trains them and gets them jobs. Nobody bothers to keep track of whether those jobs work out and whether they stay. Are they still in office a year later? Why? Because it would be embarrassing as to how poor they are. On the other hand, if the company that did that knew they were going to be measured and knew you were looking over their shoulder, they'd behave very differently and make sure they provided a better service.
We're at almost record unemployment. What's not working with the Trump economy?
Look, we have a record stock market, but half the people in the country don't own any stocks. And the stocks that are owned by individuals typically are through their pension fund or endowments or whatever, or IRAs. We have people that have jobs, that's true, but half of the workforce makes, on average, I think it's $18,000, $10 an hour. You can't feed your family on that. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it's a job, and it's better than not having a job, but it doesn't give them a path to be able to start saving or to buy a house. And remember, most people's savings are in their house. If you don't have the money to buy a house, you keep getting left further and further behind because as housing prices go up over time with inflation, the other people that have them, they're getting better and you're getting further away from them.
And part of what you're announcing today is you are in favor of a minimum $15 an hour.
Yes, in which
wage.
we have, it's been growing to that in New York City. Look, you can't live on $7.25 an hour. And is this charade that, well, we're doing something, but it isn't accomplishing what you really want to do.
You got a very high-profile celebrity endorsement this week in the form of Judge Judy
You're
Scheinman.
just jealous.
Well, I think Judge Judy is awesome, and obviously you're very pleased. How does her endorsement help your campaign?
Well, listen, she has 10 million viewers. Judge Judy is on 24/7, 52 weeks a year, someplace in this world. She's not just a phenomenon in America, she's an international phenomenon. And her viewers respect her. She's got common sense. You watch her when she's a judge. You know, come on, she'll say to the defendant or something. I don't believe that. Get real here. And people identify with her because they think that's the way the judicial system should work, and maybe it should. It doesn't, and there's lots of reasons why it doesn't, but it's common sense and an understanding of the world. And what I'm thrilled about the judge is she thinks that I have the experience and the knowledge to, in a practical sense, make the country better, pull people together, not just some great speeches with long words, and that's what I'm going to try to do in my speech on jobs. Yeah. We've done everything that I am going to recommend. We've done it in New York, and I can show you that it worked and is still working. And so, and that's what differentiates me. That's what I'm going to tell the public during the campaign from the others. Yeah. They have given some nice speeches. They have some aspirations which are great, and I'm happy they have them. And it should get us all to think and look to the future. But we need things that you can do now, and none of them have the experience of managing something. Each of them in Congress, in the Senate, has had a different expertise in what committees they were on and that sort of thing. Being on a committee, asking a question which your staffer handed to you and then not paying attention while the witness is giving an answer doesn't give you expertise.
So let me ask you quickly, just give me a couple of words about each of your opponents. Joe Biden.
I can't do that. You got to ask them.
No. I want your opinion
Joe
about
Biden,
Joe Biden.
I've played golf with him a number of times. He's given a couple of speeches with me and for me on cancer. He is a really nice guy with a compelling family story. And I think it's fair to say, no matter what the Republican Congress and Donald Trump says, there's no evidence that I know of that he and his son did anything wrong. Mm-hmm. I think it didn't look good, and he should focus on that and not let that to happen. But there's no evidence that he did anything wrong.
Elizabeth Warren.
Met her twice, once for about half an hour in a green room, and once coming in and out of a speech where she was riling against the rich, and as she came out, I said to her, you should be careful about that. I'm paying for this conference, and she laughed. And the other time I met with her, I thought she was very intelligent, dedicated. She probably believes what she says, very hardworking and very prepared. But once again, her expertise is not in managing something and doing. Her expertise is in coming up with ideas, which we should think about. Medicare for All is a good example. It is not a system that will work. She doesn't quite understand what you have in America with Medicare for All is 150 million people like the insurance they get from their employer, and under no circumstances do they want to get rid of it. There are a lot of people on Medicare, and then there's a group, 30-odd million, who have no coverage whatsoever. Let me talk about those for a second. That's unconscionable. We are too rich and too compassionate a society. You should never be in a situation where you can't go to a doctor if you feel sick and let the doctor tell you what's wrong, if there is, and then get some care. But if you look at the private health care plans pay up here, the Medicare pays down here. If everyone went down there, the hospitals couldn't afford to stay in business, and the doctors couldn't pay back their loans. What you want to do is find a better ways, and I have a better ways, which doesn't cost a lot of money, and would not fix everything, but give us a system that works and that I think would get through Congress. And that's another thing about Elizabeth. Bernie, I've never met him, so I don't know.
We have just one more minute left, so I have to wrap this up. Your campaign is unique in many ways, one of which is that you're self-funded.
Yes.
And you are spending tens of millions of dollars
Yep.
on campaign ads, and we've seen many of them no matter where you are in the country.
Hope you like them.
They're great, and including, we've just heard you're going to have a 60-second ad during the Super Bowl. Why not allow individual voters to support you at a very small level, so that you're able to say, hey, I've got America
number one,
behind me,
it wouldn't
too.
give you very much money, so, and I'm in a lucky situation.
It's not about the money, it's about the people.
Well, okay, well, you can like me and vote for me. That's the ways to show that you really care.
Okay.
Writing a check is not that. Vote is the way that in America we say, if Deborah Norville's going to show that she likes somebody or wants them, she can vote for him. That's what democracy is all about. It would not change the economics of it, but it's the appearance. And if you take a small thing, what about a bigger thing? And then somebody else is going to take something more and something more. This way, I did it for 3 elections when I was mayor. I've done it for this. I'm doing it for this election. There's just no question. And when people say to me, "Oh, you're spending all this money," I always say, "Let me get this straight. I'm spending all this money to get rid of Donald Trump. You've just been telling me he's the worst thing we could possibly have. Do you want me to spend more or less?" And invariably they say, "Oh, I didn't look at it that way, spend more."
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your time. Look forward to hearing your speech in a few minutes.
All the best.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.